Hello everyone and welcome to Quality Old Games. Today we are making another tier list, this time from Spain's unit roster in original Rome Total War, and of course this can mostly be applied to Remastered as well. And in this tier list the units are evaluated based on campaign setting, so in addition to fighting capabilities, also the costs and requirements affect the judgment. And also the units are not kind of compared to all units of Rome Total War, but kind of more like inside only the Spanish unit roster. Of course, if Spain's best unit is kind of really bad, then it cannot get S tier, but if it's decently good, even though it's not excellent per game standards regarding the whole game, then it can still get the Spartan tier. But without further ado, let's begin. We have Cavalry units first, and here we have early bodyguard. And usually I rate bodyguards only as good, because you cannot make more of them, and if the general dies, you lose the whole unit. And actually in Rome Total War it can happen quite often that the general dies by accident, if you are not careful. So I think early bodyguard for Spain deserves a place in Spartan tier, even though for instance Rome's bodyguards would only be in good tier, but the Spanish roster is not that big, and in my opinion it could have some more quality units. So because of that I think the early bodyguard deserves a place in Spartan tier. Then we have late bodyguard, and for this I will give only good tier. And the reason is that by the time you can get these late bodyguards, you are kind of in mid or late game. And in the early game, the early bodyguard can kind of dominate the battlefield. But in the mid game or late game, the bodyguards cannot do the same. So in relation to other units' strength, the strength of bodyguard units are kind of going down as the game progresses and more elite units enter the field. So that's the reasoning behind that these units get only place in good tier. Then we have long shield cavalry. Actually, as I'm doing at the moment the really hard challenge campaign as Spain, this has become quite of my favorite unit because I cannot recruit bull warriors. So I think these guys do relatively well in battle. They take only one turn to train. They are relatively cheap. Of course, the city tier 3 stables are required, so that's a bit of a minus, but overall I think based on their performance they deserve a place in highest end of good tier, or perhaps even on the lowest end of Spartan tier. But let's put them here for the moment at the very least. Then we have round shield cavalry. Actually I think it's one of the weakest light cavalries, if not the weakest. But still, because Spain just does not have too much going for them, round shield cavalry must be used at times, and I think with hammer and anvil tactics they can do okay, but you need to use tactics to kind of utilize these guys. If you send them against enemy infantry line, they will break. If you send them against enemy heavy cavalry from the front, they will break. If you send them against elite missile units, I think they might break. So you kind of need to use these as a combined arms cavalry, and you need at the very least have numerical superiority and charge the enemy from multiple directions to get round shield cavalry to work. So it's not a bad unit per se, but it requires at least some degree of micromanagement to get it to work properly. And then we have warhounds. And I think, well, despite they take 2 turns to train, the requirements and upkeep are rather reasonable, and of course when the dogs are always replenished between battles, that's really nice, and they can actually be relatively useful, so I think I will give them placing good tier here. Then let's move to infantry units. First we have bull warriors, kind of the Spain's elite infantry unit and unique infantry unit, recruited from tier 3 temples, take 2 turns to train. They are rather expensive, but they have 2 hit points, and that can mean quite a lot, because then you don't need to replenish them so often. They have quite devastating pillar throws, they hit quite hard. Of course the armor could be a bit better, but still, in my opinion, really solid infantry unit, and I think they deserve a place in good tier. And not in Spartan tier because of the 2 turns to recruit, rather high cost and relatively low defense. But overall, if you have a line of these guys, you can kind of rely on that line to hold, and you can use that hammer and anvil tactics, for instance with long shield cavalry, and even with round shield cavalry. I think a really solid infantry. Then we have Iberian infantry. I mean, this is perhaps one of the worst tier 2 units in the game. I mean, well, in Remastered their stats are buffed a bit, but in original game, okay, they can fight against Warband. Then again, Warband is tier 1 unit. They can be Town Watts. Okay, Town Watts is tier 1 unit. Or is it tier 2? No, it's tier 1. Yeah, I think they are bad. And they are, well, they are relatively cheap, but you pay the price otherwise, because you cannot really rely on these guys on the battlefield. Of course, if you have proper general and good numbers on your side, then yeah, they can do okay. But in my experience, if one relies on them, one will become disappointed, because they will break and they just cannot deal with the enemy equivalents. For instance, Gauls will have swordsmen, so they will definitely beat these. Okay, if you are fighting Carthage, then you can beat those Libyan spearmen, but for instance Roman Hastati will just wreck these guys. So yeah, in my opinion, bad. There are situations where you need to train them, and you may not have other options, so I think you just might end up needing them at some point until you can get better troops. But I think they become obsolete as soon as you can get higher tier troops to the field. And then we have Naked Fanatics. I have made quite a lot of jokes about these guys, but actually if one considers Spain's roster and tier 1 and 2 units, infantry units, Naked Fanatics are actually the best option. I cannot believe that I'm saying this, but I think actually in Spanish roster Naked Fanatics could be okay. Of course, they take 2 turns to train, but at the same time, the temple from which you can get these guys is kind of the requirement for the temple from which you can get bull warriors. So it's probable that you are building the temple in any case, and if you already have it, why not to recruit these guys? Unless of course you can unit troops faster, and then you may perhaps go to Iberian infantry, or perhaps better still to cavalry if you have the stables. But overall I think in Spanish roster these guys would be okay. Yeah. Then we have peasants. This has been controversial move in earlier videos, but I will still put these guys into S tier. Because Spain is barbarian faction, they are limited to tier 3 settlements, and that will mean quite a few public order issues in the later game. And Spain has one rather difficult settlement to manage, Cordoba, and it will grow quite fast, and Spain doesn't have the public order buildings to keep the population happy with that way, so most likely you will end up having a large garrison over there, for instance, and in other great cities as well. So you will be needing peasants, or your unit's upkeep will skyrocket if you kind of use proper fighting units as a garrison in those settlements. Of course, peasants are not good, or rather they are just miserable in battle, but they are not kind of intended to be used in battle, except in the direst of needs. And one additional bonus is that you can move population from one settlement to another, for instance, so that you could get these good units, Long Shield Cavalry and Bull Warriors. So yeah, I think peasants are relatively important for Spain in almost all phases of the game, and because of that, they deserve a place in Spartan tier. Then we have Scutari. I mean, it would be really good, if not even Spartan, were it tier 2 unit. Kind of improved version of Hastati. But they are tier 3 unit, and that means they are competing against Chosen Swordsmen, Principes. Carthage is about to get those. Actually, are Libyan Spearmen actually tier 3 unit? Well, Carthage is about to get those Pawnee Infantries and so on and so forth rather soon. So, as this is tier 3 unit, I think it's only okay, but quite on the upper end of the okay tier. And the reasoning is that they have quite devastating pillar throws. That's really nice. And furthermore, as you are conquering areas, in most of the settlements there are some kind of barracks, and especially in the bigger cities those barracks might be or likely are already tier 3. So you can replenish those troops right away, and you can begin to train new ones. Whereas most likely if you want to retrain Bull Warriors, you need to build the temple chain from scratch. So that's the thing going for those Scutari. Of course, at the same time, in my opinion, their fighting capabilities could be a bit better, because, well, in my experience, they are not that reliable in battle. So, for example, if you are facing Hoplite, tier 2 unit, you cannot be certain that your Scutari will beat them, and you cannot be certain that they can actually even hold the line long enough for your cavalry to be able to maneuver behind the hoplites and perhaps break them. So that's the reason why they are only okay in my books and not good. Then we have Town Watch. That's just horrible. Don't make. I mean, tier 1 unit, sure, but I mean, these guys make Eastern Infantry to look good, and that's quite a lot. So, in my opinion, this might be, the Town Watch units might be the worst units in the entire game. So, best to avoid. Try to get even Iberian infantries instead of these guys. Then let's move to missile units. First we have Peltasts. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Javelin units or skirmisher units. I mean, or perhaps these are actually skirmishers instead of Peltasts. My main complaint is that they have low number of javelins which they can throw. And that shows quite soon in the battle, of course. If you can get these guys behind the enemy line and they can throw the javelins there, they can be quite devastating, but quite often that's not the case because these guys are not cavalry, but infantry. So, yeah, they can do something, and in some cases you just don't have any better units to use. So, yeah, bad unit, perhaps a bit better than Iberian infantry, but I mean, at least I'm rather avoiding these guys. Because if you get to higher tier settlements, you can train Scutari, and these guys don't have too many more javelins, more than Scutari, and Scutari can do rather okay in melee battles, and these guys just don't do that well. So yeah, in my opinion, they're rather bad. Then we have slingers. My main complaint is kind of remedied. They do have a bit more of missiles, but I mean, tier 3 archery building for slingers, that's quite a lot. I mean, other factions are getting archers, or even long-range archers in case of Romans, Archer Auxilia. So most definitely these guys will be outclassed by them. But I mean, they are the best missile unit Spain can get, practically. So if you want missile units in your army, you just have to use slingers, or perhaps these skirmishers or peltas, whichever they are called. And I mean, yeah, of course the problem with slingers is that you cannot kind of rely on them to shoot over the heads of your infantry line. They might end up shooting their back, and that's not nice. So you kind of need to keep the units on the sides of your infantry line or in front of it and use skirmish mode, and that kind of limits the viability of the unit in many cases. So I'm kind of, is it bad or is it okay? But I think, well, it's okay. But I mean, in the campaign setting, perhaps you shouldn't build those archery buildings at all. Go instead of stables, because you can get rather good cavalry unit as long shield cavalry. I mean, if you compare slingers to long shield cavalry, they are almost like day and night. So yeah, I mean, I'm still tempted to put it here, but let's let it remain there. Okay, so this is my view of Spain's infantry roster. Do you agree or disagree? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment field below. And if you liked the video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Consider also becoming channel member. The support would be greatly valued, and you will get some perks which are listed in the channel membership page. And thank you for existing channel members. Your support is greatly treasured. Have a great rest of the day. Quality Old Games out.